In this video, I'm going to be comparing the Hangover trilogy to Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa. This is a trilogy from a Danish director. I don't know really anything about these three movies, but I definitely know about the Hangover movies. I haven't seen them, but I've actually heard things about them. When you look at highest score for each franchise, the highest score for the other trilogy than the Hangover is an 82% for the movie Europa, whereas if Hangover, the original movie, has a 79%. When you look at lowest score, Hangover Part 3 only has a 21%. The movie Epidemic has a 25%. When you look at average score, Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa have an average of 62. Hangover Trilogy has an average of 44. When you look at gap between lowest and highest score, you got a gap of 58 in the case of Hangover, and you got a gap of 57 actually in the case of Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa. So by literally only 1%, Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa win this round. They've won every round so far, so they're going to be winning this debate. And in this case, it's not difficult for me at all. I'm going to say the Element of Crime, Epidemic, Europa is the franchise I would choose, because I know that Hangover Part 2 and 3 are famous for being bad comedy sequels. I think the problem here is that fundamentally, the premise of Hangover is not one that lends itself to a follow-up. It's not one that lends itself to sequels. What am I talking about here? Well, the premise of Hangover is that these three guys are in Las Vegas. They get drunk one night and then they black out, and so the next day they can't remember what happened the night before, and thus they're trying to figure out what happened there. It works really well for one movie, but that's not a repeatable concept, because as soon as you have the same thing happen to the same group of people for a second time, you're having to explain, wait a minute, why is the same thing happening to these people again? You have to contrive an explanation for why these people are going through the same thing again. That's a problem. You can feel with Hangover Part 2 and 3, the people behind these movies are trying to get more out of this premise than what's really there. You can feel them trying to fabricate a franchise where one doesn't actually make sense, where it doesn't feel natural, doesn't feel like, yeah, this makes sense as a follow-up to the original movie. And what I've heard about Hangover Part 2 is that the problem with the movie's humor is that it just rehashes jokes from the first movie, but does them in a way where they're even more mean-spirited, so it doesn't actually work. I haven't heard as much about Hangover Part 3. I've heard more about Hangover Part 2, but pretty much everyone agrees the original Hangover is really funny. Sequels are not very good. I don't know much at all about Element of Crime, Epidemic, and Europa, but two of the movies have over 75% of Rotten Tomatoes. That tells you something. So I'm going to choose those three movies over the Hangover trilogy. They'll wrap things up for this video.